Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you're here with us today. Whether you're with us in spirit through the recording or you're with us live, we know you had many other things that you could be doing with this time, and we're honored that you choose to be here with us for our summer interlude session. As always, we want to begin with our land acknowledgement and a minute of silence to get centered or present here in mind, body, and spirit. While we all acknowledge that we are indigenous to planet Earth, we would like to also point out that Eremos and those joining us today are gathering from homes on the indigenous lands of Turtle Island, the ancestral name for what is now called North America. Specifically, we wish to honor the Takawa, understood to be the primary indigenous peoples who are part of the Austin area, as well as other tribes, including the Comanche, Lepanapantche, and all the indigenous peoples who are part of these lands and territories here in Central Texas. May we pause for a moment of silence and thanksgiving for their stewardship of this land for over 16,000 years. Thank you. Thank you. And as you all know, the theme for this series of summer interlude sessions, as well as our theme for the year, is about thriving together. And today we are blessed to have David Wallace and Dr. Anna Vu Wallace here with us to talk about what prevents us from thriving. I know many of you probably went to the website and saw their bio or saw it in our newsletter, but just in case you didn't, I want to take a moment to introduce them and welcome them. David Wallace is a minister for an inclusive, non-denominational spiritual community here in Austin called Metanoia Journey, and hopefully we'll have time to hear more about that during this presentation. He was previously a director of Baylor University's executive MBA program and has been senior sales and business development roles in his 30-plus year career. Through a call to help others see that they are not their resumes, he left the corporate world to become a full-time life coach in October of 2015. He has been a daily meditation practitioner since 2011 and is a commissioned presenter of centering prayer through contemplative outreach. He completed a master's in divinity here in Austin at the Austin Presbyterian Seminary in 2022 and co-founded Metanoia Journey. And Dr. Anna Vu Wallace has been a hospital-based internal medicine physician for 30 years. She is now a medical director for Inhabit Hospice based here in Austin and is on call. She'll mention that in a moment. She began her meditation study in 2009 with an Eastern practice and is now practicing centering prayer. And she too is trained and certified to teach centering prayer through contemplative outreach. Dr. Vu also studied stress reduction and the relaxation response through the Benson Henry Institute, Harvard Medical School. Her passion is integrating mind, body, spirit, and she is also a co-founder of Metanoia Journey. Welcome, David and Anna. We're so glad to have you here with us.
Thank you, Diana. I just wanted to start out by saying that David and I share this presentation together. However, being on call, I'm going to be interrupted a few times more than I would like. So David will be doing the majority of the presentation, and I'm happy to participate at the end for the Q&A session. David?
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Diana, for that wonderful introduction. I would like to just begin with this topic that we come up with, which what prevents us from thriving. This is the topic that we've established for today for the Eremos presentation. And as I thought about what it feels like to thrive, I went and looked it up. What does thriving mean, right? And thriving means to grow or to develop well. There are synonyms for thriving, which are to flourish, to burgeon, to bloom, to expand, to grow in health and strength. And when in my life coaching terms, thriving is all about working on your self-development, your personal growth, and your resilience. So this is a lot of the main reason why Anna and I decided to co-found this organization with other people. It was to allow people a place where they have the ability to thrive. And we understand that thriving is directly associated with our inner disposition, or what we call in our inner work group, what is our inner state? Our inner state is where our world exists. And so life is happening all around us. And much of, if not all of it, is out of our control. But what is within our grasp, at least for the most part, is how we take these happenings that are coming in through our five senses. The world is coming at us. And the one thing that we might have a choice in is how we interpret what is happening. So I want to begin by offering something from Thomas Merton, who's a 20th century Christian mystic. And I think that Thomas kind of nailed it when he offers us this. He says, "What can we gain by sailing to the moon if we are not able to cross the abyss that separates us from ourselves?" So for the last dozen or so years, Anna and I have come to know that there are indeed aspects of what we think are us that are actually masks or buffers from this thing that separates us from our true self. And what is our true self? We won't get into that today, but just very, very briefly, this is what is referred to in the Hebrew and Christian scriptures as the imago Dei, or the image of God, being made in the image and likeness of our common creator. So who are you? And I always like this question when you go into a party for the first time and you meet a bunch of people that you don't know. Like, how does that whole conversation develop, right? So the first thing that you might go up to someone, you introduce yourself, you give them your name. Okay, so that might be part of who you are. And then maybe some of the subsequent questions that might happen after that are, well, what do you do? Right? So there's where your resume, and so here's where your education might come into play, or what you do professionally might be an aspect of what you offer. You might get into eventually, okay, I have a partner, I have a spouse, we have kids. These are some of the responsibilities as this conversation is developing. You might offer up some of your accomplishments and setbacks. And as I wrote this slide, I went, I wonder if I would actually offer anybody that I just met, what are my life challenges and setbacks and my failures? I might not be too prudent to put that right out there, but that's an option, right? As you're describing who you think you are. And then, of course, we have our physical bodies. So the question is who you are, but might be better to ask, what are we? And so when we talk about this idea of ego, personality, and persona, and I use these terms interchangeably, but what is an ego, or personality, or persona? So going back to the good old Oxford Dictionary, persona is the aspect of someone's character that is presented to or perceived by others. So it mentions here her public persona. You often hear about maybe somebody, a TV celebrity's public persona. So it's a role or a character adopted by an author or an actor. Your image, your face, your identity, yourself is some of the examples that are offered here. So what makes up this persona? What comprises it? On some level, and I think a very small amount, it might be some things that are passed on by our parents' DNA, right? So there might be something that we have a proclivity towards, maybe physically, that is passed on. But I think the rest of these elements are really what creates what we call our personality or our ego. And so these might be parents' passed on belief systems. So we learn to imitate what our parents believe, right? And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not so good. And we all have our individual experiences around that. Parental expectations make up our personality. So what our parents expect of us. our own expectations. This I find in my life to be a big thing, right? Are the expectations I set on myself. Oh, I should do this. I should do better. These create an aspect of who I think I am. Our cultural conditioning is absent of where you grew up, the context and the location that you live. Religious belief systems are part of our personality, good and not so good, for sure. Peer pressure. I remember growing up being in my peer group. You want to belong. Everyone wants to belong to a group. So peer pressure might actually have an effect on our personality, our idea of self, our identity, so to speak. Socioeconomic position plays a certain important role, as well as life circumstances, right? Including traumas, all of these things. And I'm sure the list is much more massive than this, but these are things that will comprise what our personality is. And I'll just say this, these slides I'll make available to Diana if she would like to send them out afterwards, so you don't have to take copious notes if you don't want to. So knowing that, so we realize now that we have this personality and this persona. So we are an actor or an actress that plays out our role on the stage of humanity. But is our personality really who we are? And are we stuck with it, right? So we have this personality, and through this personality, we're taking in through our five senses the way that the world is coming at us, right? So we have how we see the world through this personality. And one spiritual teacher of mine always would say, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are, right? And so I came across this image and I saw this little pin dot of this picture and this person walking towards a bench in a park. But we don't have the big picture, right? So if you want to look at your personality as a way to see that you're feeling, sensing, tasting, seeing the world, it is your point of view. And I've often asked people to put up their hand and make a little pin dot and say, this is how I see the world. And it's a good reminder for me to recognize that my point of view, and Richard Rohr was classic at this, another Christian mystic. Richard Rohr has a way of juxtaposing this phrase. He said, your point of view is a view from a point. And it's really a good reminder that that this David sees the world and interprets it through all of those things that I presented. And again, that list is massive of many things I couldn't put on the slide. But that's my view from a point. It's not an exhaustive view. It's not. I'm not seeing the big picture here. I'm seeing only the portion that I can see and perceive. So our personality is a psychological construct developed by our mind to help us relate to and make our way in the world. And friends, it's absolutely necessary and integral to being human. This is the key. What's also integral to being human are that we have thoughts and that we have feelings and emotions and that we have bodily sensations. These are absolutely integral to the idea of being human. But what's really, really important to remember is that they are not us, because we can observe them. And this is the key to our topic today on thriving through inner work, is learning to be the observer of these things that are happening, learning to observe our thoughts, learning to observe our feelings and emotions, observe what's happening in the body. Because if these things were actually us, we couldn't observe them, because an observer can't observe itself. When you think about science experiments, right, the observer is watching the experiment. So it's observing, and what's being done is the observed. So if you can look at these things, you can recognize that they are what's being observed. So what part of us is doing the observing of these things? We are known as Homo sapiens sapiens. And Homo sapiens sapiens are creatures that know and know that they know, right? That's why there's two sapiens there. Creatures that know and know that they know that we know, which makes us unique to every living creature around. We have a reflective capability that allows us to look back at things in the past, to think about and project things into the future. I don't know how accurate we are when we do that, but there's this attempt to move, at least intellectually and emotionally, out of the present moment, right? We have so many deer in our neighborhood, and they're always in the present moment. Sometimes they feel fearful and run off, but they're all about what's happening now. Whereas human beings, I think our capability of being able to reflect in the past and project into the future is the very problem often to thriving, actually. And we'll get to that in a bit. So what makes up the human being? It's a physical body. We call it the body center. It's an intellectual center, or the mind, and it's the emotional center. But I like to ask people, and this is probably really hard to do on Zoom, but when I've done this presentation like this in the past in person, I've asked people to point to themselves. So I would just like to ask you right now, if you would just point to yourself and then hold your finger where you point. Okay, so I can't see Marilyn's hand, but so, okay, so as I point and I ask people to hold it, and I go, okay, stop. Where are you pointing? You're not pointing to your head. You're pointing to your heart. And it's kind of a little playful game, but the idea that I think that I want people to take away from it is we have this body and this intellectual center that allows us. The intellectual center is not bad, it's really good. But the emotional center drives the bus. When you're negative about something, you can make the justification in your mind fit the equation. You can sell ice to the Eskimos at that point. It's very easy to bring yourself to making a justification intellectually about an emotion that you're having. But if we are feeling beings, then we are made for connection. And so the point here in terms of why inner work is important is because when you begin to recognize who you are and what you're not, then you can begin to see the same thing in other people, right? So it creates this connection that is available to us. Now, what all human beings desire, and you can see I have that italicized and underlined, is what this is often referred to from Thomas Keating's work as the programs for happiness. And that was his little sarcastic play on words, meaning that they're really not programs for happiness, they're really programs for misery, but all human beings desire three basic things. They desire the need for safety and security. We all want to feel safe and secure. Sometimes that might be personal security, financial security, physical security. We all want the need to have affection, esteem, and approval as human beings. I mean, I wake up every day hoping that people like me and that my wife is not upset with me. I mean, we all want to have affection, esteem, and approval. We want to be liked by our friends and family. We want the respect of our colleagues. Sure, there's nothing wrong with that. We all want a sense of power and control. And I struggle a little bit with this word power. It's really empowerment, I think is what is implied here, not to have power over others, but this idea that I have agency, some sense of agency and control in what happens to me, right? But what's interesting about this idea of desire, and Dr. David Hawkins, I don't know if any of you are familiar with his work, but he was an MD and a PhD and was the director of the Institute for Spiritual Research. And he did a lot of renowned pioneering research in the field of consciousness. And he served as an advisor for Catholic, Protestant, and Buddhist monasteries. In his book, Letting Go, The Pathway to Surrender, he defines desire this way. The emotion may range from a mild wanting to an obsessive driven craving for something or someone. It is also expressed as greed, obsession, hunger, envy, jealousy, clinging, hoarding, ruthlessness, fixation, frenzy, exaggeration, overambition, selfishness, lust, possessiveness, control, glamorization, insatiability. And what he's really talking about here with those kind of, there's some pretty heavy hitters in that list, right? But what he's really talking about then is that there's this feeling of never being satisfied, there never being enough. There's a feeling of must have. And you can sense the urgency and constriction in those phrases. So the underlying quality of these emotions that I just listed from Dr. David Hawkins is its drivenness. So when we are at the mercy of desire in that way, we are no longer free, friends. We are controlled by it. We are run by it, enslaved and led around the nose by it. So, and this is kind of my perception of this, our ego, our personality's job is to keep us safe and comfortable. And you can see I've got this medieval castle picture there, and that looks kind of like pretty locked down, actually. It doesn't look very open, but that's the point, I think, of what happens when our personality unconsciously moves to anxiety and fear or regret, rumination. The ego then, so as I looked at this image and I kind of played with it, I thought about, well, when this was a budding community, the drawbridge would be down, the villagers are coming and going, the marketplace and the castle is wide open, there's flow. And to me, that's when we are thriving when we are in this place, when we are not led by, unconsciously led by the desire for having more affection or controlling others, and those things are not present, we can feel lightness in the body, and you can feel our ability to be, as you know, as we kind of talk about this idea of being in the flow. But the second we unconsciously move to an emotion of shame or guilt or regret or anxiety or fear, that drawbridge closes up, and the archers are in the tower, and everything is on lockdown. And that's what happens to the personality when we unconsciously move to those places. And it often leads us to distractions or addictions, and we can talk about those offline. But the very things, if you can reflect on, when maybe you notice that you don't know why you're feeling anxious or something, but you notice there's something in the body maybe, or maybe you do notice that you're feeling regret or whatever, shame. What happens for you all individually? What do you do? It can be as mild as mindlessly picking up your phone or going to the refrigerator. Obviously, there are some more addictions that can be much more detrimental to yourself and relationships. But that's the ego's job, is to say, oh, my David is under stress. Let me have him reach for his phone and play Bubble Panda, whatever it might be. It's, but it's always going to lead you to this place of trying to take away the illusion, to take away the discomfort and give you the illusion of comfort and safety. But that's not going to be thriving. You're going to be constricted. You're going to be closed down. So it says that the ego's job is to keep us safe and comfortable. But what it doesn't say is it keeps us happy, peaceful, untroubled, or thriving, right? So Anna gave a talk called "The Ego Is Not Your Amigo," which that's another fun one. Maybe we could do that another time. But the personality / ego is very, very vital, friends. Is very, very vital. But what happens is if we are emotional beings first, that kind of drive the bus for everything else, how the body reacts, how the mind reacts. This is what normally happens, that to create this, as Thomas Merton was saying earlier, this separating us from ourselves. If you look at sort of quadrant one, that like 1 o'clock there, number one, a person has an experience. So here's a young person that gets taken to football practice, and his parents drop him off at football practice, and then they go back to their corner store, which is their family business, and it's a 7-day business. So this young person gets dropped off, and he looks over there in the stands, and his parents are the only ones that aren't there. Leads to number two, which is he has a feeling that I'm rejected or I'm unloved. I'm not special for my parents. That's not at all what happened. That's not at all their intention. They're driven by the desire for security, right? They've got to go back to the store because they have to provide. Their intention was not to hurt their young son or give them the feeling that they were unloved. But he feels rejected because he looks over and, what does he say? And, kids can certainly use big superlative statements a lot. My parents were the only ones that weren't there. They're the only ones, right? And so there's this sense that I'm rejected. And then if he has another circumstance a little bit later with maybe his first love or something like that, all of a sudden this person maybe cheats on him or something. And all of a sudden it creates, number three, it creates a belief that I'm not worthy of being loved. But it's all happening at an unconscious level. And then what happens, unfortunately, is it can lead to an expectation in the fourth phrase, or what we call fulfilling the prophecy, where now we have this emotional belief system that I'm not worthy of being loved. And that every time you get close to someone, what will come up is this expectation that says that always happens. People always leave. They're always unloving. And it leads us to, unfortunately, our drawbridge of our castle closing up. And from there, it leads us to unconsciously thoughts and feelings, and then eventually behaviors that are unloving towards the very people we want it from, right? So this person wants to have a deeper personal, intimate relationship with someone and be close to their parents. This person wants to have a good relation with their colleagues in work, but it leads them to not being able to handle criticism, even constructive, on the job. So all of a sudden they lash out and they're fired. Or all of a sudden someone starts getting passive aggressive in their comments to a loved one, which ends up driving them away, which then confirms that it always happens, right? So this is how our emotional habits and beliefs, and this is an example, this was a life coaching client of mine. That was a pretty dramatic story, but it was all about learning to uncover what's been going on at a deeper level. Okay, so there are these emotional habits that drive us. But the thing is, I hope this is where the hope of this presentation comes in, is that it's like malware on our hard drive. We are given this operating system that it's already, we all want to feel secure. We all want to have affection and esteem. We all want to have agency. Those things are absolutely imperative and integral to being human, and there's nothing wrong with them. But what happens is that when, like that example I just gave, we unconsciously develop emotional beliefs that we didn't have any control of, nor were the people necessarily involved doing it purposely. That's another thing to remember about this. But it creates malware that gets on our operating system. It leads to what David Hawkins was talking about, this over attachment, this drivenness to having more. I need more affection. I need people to respect me better. And it leads to envy and some of these other things that are not the most pleasant outcomes that will affect relationships. But we are not aware of them, friends. That's the key. We're not aware of them. We actually develop a superpower in these emotional habits and beliefs. If these things have been happening from our childhood, then of course we end up becoming really good. These are go-to moves that the ego does automatically. They're instantaneous. They're mechanical. And we develop a superpower or a lens that we naturally see the world through that creates an opportunity for us to be separate from who we are and from others. So an unconscious ego is what we call a bridge over the present moment between the past and the future. So remember, I was talking about the deer in our neighborhood. They're in the present moment, but as Homo sapiens sapiens, with this ability to reflect, our ego is often, I'm sitting here in the present moment, but I could be 10 minutes ago. I could be thinking about a conversation I had with a close friend a month ago that I'm still regretting, right? So I might be feeling rumination and regret about a particular situation, or I'm sitting here worried about what's going to happen 10 minutes from now or 10 years from now. And it keeps us, so the unconscious ego keeps bouncing us, where if we're talking about thriving, friends, thriving happens here. I know that I love the topics that Eremos has for the summer, where there's lots of talk about being in nature and gardening and good conversations. Those are outward relating topics, which are great. And it's always about being in the present moment for them to be happy. I know that when I'm in nature, I often don't have this unconscious ego dragging me to the past. I'm very present when I'm in nature. I love it. But it's when you're alone, when you're sitting there at 3 o'clock in the morning, is when all of a sudden these parts of our ego will start to play with us. So without conscious awareness, we live our lives mechanically. We say the same things and we do the same things and we react the same way. We behave the same way. But here's the key, friends. It's not our fault. It's all unconscious. It's all unconscious. But we can have metanoia, and that's the key name for our community, Metanoia Journey. So if anyone, for our friends that are online with us or those that are going to watch in the future, it's probably safe to say most, if not all of you, have heard the phrase, repent for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And English Bible translations have taken the original Greek term because they were originally written in Greek. The word for repent is actually the word metanoia in Greek. And it's been wrongly translated by English translations as the word repent. And the word repent in our language means to feel remorse for what we've done wrong or how we're unworthy. There's that sense of sort of shame in the word repent. And that's been a huge disservice for many people in the Christian faith. The term metanoia actually means to change one's mind. So it's the journey of changing one's mind, one's heart, one's self, one's way of life. So you can actually take that same text and say, if they were to use that definition, what Jesus was offering his followers at the time was saying, not repent for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. What he's saying is change your mind about where you're looking for this fulfillment. It's not in having more power. It's not in having more affection. It's not in having more security that leads to these sort of unhealthy thoughts and behaviors. Is saying, change your mind. When he would say, follow me, what he was getting at was not the person, not to follow the person's sit, but follow that way of life, that way of understanding, that way of seeing. He would always say, for those that can see, those that have ears hear. What he's talking about is this opportunity to change your mind about who you are, who your neighbor is, and who the world is. So in our context for today's gathering, they were unconsciously seeing themselves and their world through the lens that stymies instead of one that allows for thriving. So, but why should we do this? Well, here's the thing, friends, you don't need to do inner work. Absolutely doesn't even matter if you do inner work. It doesn't affect your ability to live. It certainly doesn't affect your ability to survive in the world either. And what I found interesting as I was writing this is like, okay, yes, you don't need to do inner work and to reflect on who you really are to function in the world. You can have jobs and you can have relationships, and some days are going to be good and some days are going to not be so good. And you can survive in the world. But without inner work, without looking inwardly, and that's why we see our inner work as another contemplative practice, right? There's the contemplative prayer of silence and letting go. And then there's this, which is an active practice, that you can survive in the world, but you're not going to thrive in the world because there's always going to be an action reaction. This person did this to me. I have a right to be negative. Yes, you have a right to be negative. There is no one saying that you don't have the right to hold an account against somebody that has done you wrong. But where's the freedom in that? Where's the untroubledness in that? Where's the thriving in that for you? Thriving is about you. It's not about others. And so as you think about this, if you lived a good bit of our lives, and I know that many of us have, struggling with negative emotions or self-sabotaging messages that we give ourselves, seeking the world's approval for us, to see our own value, I mean, to have others tell me that I'm valuable for me to know it. Some of us reach a particular point in our lives when at one moment we stop in all this chaos and we look up, or I should say, I want to speak I'll speak for myself. For me, it was 2:30 in the morning on some Friday night, walking my dog, looking up in the sky and going, God, creator, whatever, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I don't want this for myself anymore. I was angry. I was feeling justified. I was feeling there was no thriving. It was surviving. It was surviving moment to moment, but it wasn't thriving. And I just, this slide by, as I always like to call him, Billy Shakespeare, our friend Billy Shakespeare offers us this, right? There's nothing more confining than the prison we don't know we are in. So what do? We begin the journey of self-discovery by actively bringing conscious awareness to ourselves. And it begins with self-observation. And what's interesting about this isn't just a David and Anna particular thing. This has been going on for thousands of years. And here are some of our friends that speak to this concept. The highest spiritual practice is self-observation without judgment. And I wish I could make that in 72-point type. The without judgment is key, our friend Swami Kripalu. Without judgment. I mean, self-observation is, again, just looking like as an observer of a science experiment. It's looking at the personality and going, yeah, boy, oh boy, I hold accounts, don't I? Isn't that interesting? Without judging it, without the shame of it, realizing that it was a habit that was mechanically put on me from earlier in life. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Some guy named Aristotle, I don't know who that is, but it's some guy named Aristotle. Self-observation is the first step of inner unfolding. Amit Ray. Take closer care of your inner stories. They create your outer life. Jaya John. Observe all humans, thyself most. Benjamin Franklin. And if you're ready to listen, and if you're ready to be challenged, there's one thing you can do, but no one can help you. What is the most important thing of all? It's called self-observation. Anthony DeMello. So if one decides, like I did, going up and saying, I can't do this anymore. I want to know what I'm being led around by, what's driving me instead of what I'm driving. Before you say, I want to do this, remember these sort of key takeaways. Patience. I just need to write the word patience like 1,000 times on this slide over and over and over again. Like patience, 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 because it's so important. we've developed superpowers, friends, one childhood memory I'm working on was 50 years ago. And it's affected how I've certainly viewed certain parts of my life this whole 50 years. So I've got to be compassionate and patient with myself as I learn to unwind. That's a pretty tight knot, but it's there. So patience is key. To begin to believe that your thoughts and your negative thoughts and emotions and body sensations are not your true self, but those are part of your egoic truth, your egoic false self. Understand and accept that you will swing and miss at doing this on your attempts to bring change, since you spent a lifetime subconsciously developing these superpowers. Self-compassion. Oh, this is the other one. Self-compassion is so critical, to be non-judgmental and to be non-critical when you observe something about yourself with scathing self-honesty. It's huge. Watch the voice in the head that we call the critic or the judge, who belittles you for not succeeding at it, right? Self-compassion. To begin to change, it's like, you won't even see it at first. Others will notice it in you before you do anything that you're ever going to recognize. Just like with contemplative prayer, that's the same thing. Lightness of being is imperative, guys. It's a must. We have to do this self-discovery with a sense of lightness and delight. And I know it sounds like inner work. It just sounds pretty foreboding, but it can be done with lightness. You know, these things are not your fault. They're unconscious mechanisms. And as we think about sort of inner work, some people call it shadow work, you know, whatever you want to call it, monsters in the closet. There's no monsters in the closet. You know, that's the thing about the darkness. It's not foreboding and evil. It's just dark. And when we begin self-observation, especially if we can learn to do it non-critically and non-judgmentally, it's like flipping the light on in the closet. You go, okay, oh, wow, this monster, I thought, okay, there's a mouse. Okay, we got that. We got a mouse there. There's some stuff I don't need. I can get rid of that. There's definitely some things that are blocking the way to get into the closet. There's dust, you know, maybe I need to rearrange some things. But that's how we approach inner work, is that there's no sense of shame or guilt in this. It's all about going, gosh, how would my life be different if this thing that I've recognized has become a mechanical emotional habit that's driven me in my life? How would my life be different if I could? And I saw this great presentation where the guy was presenting this concept of get over it. And we've all heard that term kind of put that way, get over it. And it's such I think a really destructive way of putting it. But he just took the same words and he toned it differently. And he said, instead of get over it, which is sort of this condescending, patronizing comment, to what if you could get over it? How would your life be with you if this need for everyone's approval, if that's your thing, right, wasn't driving the bus? What would it look like? So self-observation is to look at situations in the present or even the past. You can look at your past events and make change today and realize what was running you in the moment and learning to see what's false in you. Okay, so this is where this lightness of being comes in. So in our community, we do an annual Halloween personality party. And so this idea, Anna's laughing. Are you laughing at my costume, Anna, or are you laughing at your own? Because I'm not following, because I can't see you very well. But so these were the two that we chose this past October. And so for me, Anna, I'm gonna ask you to come on and you could speak to your costume there. But so my personality element, and again, you identify what we call false eyes in inner work. So I have an eye in me that's what I called aloysius accountability. So there's this aspect of my personality, and for those that, and I know that Eremos has done Enneagram study as well, I identify as a 1 on the Enneagram. I know you all feel sorry for me. Thank you very much. But there's a sense of like this accountability that I have for, to do the right thing, right? So there's this accountability. And sometimes it's led me to being certainly unloving to myself, but then to my kids and stuff. And I've recognized that there are aspects when I'm in that space that I'm not thriving. I'm surviving. And so for me, aloysius accountability is what would this thing manifest? What would this character look like if it was real? And I said, okay, so here's where this false version of me thinks it's perfect, but obviously has no style sense whatsoever, none whatsoever. has a pocket protector. He's a little bit of, kind of an accountant guy. He's got broken glasses that are taped together at the top. So there's anything but perfection that's happening with this character. But friends, when I certainly uncovered this what I call false I, not true self element of my personality, and started playing around with it, it got so much fun. And now when I see it pop up, I can another element of self-observation or inner work is called non-identification. So I can look at it and I can begin to non-identify with this aspect. This isn't me. This Aloysius guy is not me. And so if I can see it in the moment, I can consciously change my mind. I can consciously have metanoia about and go, I don't want Aloysius in this moment. I want to allow my kids to be the way they want to be. I want to allow my ability to be imperfect to not upset the rest of my day. So that's just one aspect. Anna, do you want to unmute and comment about
Sure.
this character?
Yes, I identify as a 4 on the Enneagram. And the characteristic and my superpower is that I have this intense need for approval. I grew up as an immigrant in the middle of the Midwest. And when I arrived in Kansas at the age of 8, I was rejected. I was the first Asian person that even landed in a small little town in Kansas. They didn't know what to do with me. So they rejected me. And there was a lot of, racism back then. And I felt the need for approval. I want to be accepted. And so that incorporated itself into my personality. And so I grew up getting titles. I've discovered that if I'm really good in school, I get all these awards, and people would, go, congratulations, and I'd be loved, and they hugged me, and I thought, way to get, accepted. So that it became my superpower. That led me into this career of medicine, full of titles, right? Full of, and it was never enough. That's the problem. It was just never enough. And there's just this constant yearning need until I started the inner work, and I realized, there's my motivation. I could then go look at the child, go back in time even to look at that child at 8-year-old that was hurt by the racism, by the words that were slung at her, and understood for her and understood why. And that was just such self-compassion that it just started to fade. And so now I don't feel that need, but boy, it sure is fun to dress up like that. It's so much fun. And you all are invited, by the way.
Yes, next October. We'll put the date out. You all are invited. Thanks, Anna. Okay, just continue. I got just a few more slides. Am I okay on time, Diana? Okay. So what does this say about us? First of all, that we're perfectly imperfect. We are human. This is how we were made. This is our ability. The reason we're Homo sapiens sapiens is that when we decide we have this choice to reflect back on ourselves and observe ourselves, it's there. There's nothing broken or bad in any of us. That we all have a core of goodness and joy, just waiting to be uncovered, to moving from surviving to thriving. And that there are subconscious mechanisms running us that we're not even aware of. What's important to remember is that we have to learn to let go of the illusion that my false self is me. Like I said, for me, Aloysius accountability, that's how I do that. That's not David. That's Aloysius. That's not me. Learning to know and accept that we are perfectly imperfect. Accepting is hard. That's why I underlined it. Sometimes I still refuse to accept that I'm perfectly imperfect. Know that we are unbelievably valuable just by being alive. That we get to be grateful because our source is providing all of our needs for the journey. And that we need to do it with humility. And I learned about 5-6 years ago that humility isn't thinking less of oneself, it's thinking of oneself less, right? So this idea that if we get out and we serve others, we begin to see that our problems are maybe a little bit smaller, and we can become a little bit less self-focused. So some tools for self-observation are deep breathing, and I don't have time to do all these, but body scans, and we can go over that. If you're having a negative emotion, if you catch it, sometimes we're identified in the moment and we are the emotion, and sometimes instead of ready, aim, fire. It's ready, fire, aim. It kind of comes out. But if you have a moment where you can catch it, sit down and close your eyes and just feel what's happening in the body. That might just help to dissipate the emotion. Affirmations, like one that I might use is I am spirit, perfect, holy, and harmonious. Nothing can hurt me or make me sick or afraid. For God is spirit, and nothing can make God hurt, sick, or afraid. I manifest my true self through God now. That's an affirmation that you can bring that might begin to metanoia for you. The welcoming prayer, some of you may know that. This idea of not consenting to the negative experience you're having, but learning to say, I let go of my desire for security, affection, and control, and embrace the moment as it is, right? Again, because we can't control outer circumstances, but we might be able to change our mind about how we bring them in. And that thoughts, feelings, and emotions are not I. So don't say things like, I'm afraid. Say this is David experiencing what fear is like, learning to separate emotions from our true self. An Enneagram study, I don't need to tell you all about that, but that's a great place to begin to start self-observing. It's like, oh, reformer does this. Isn't that interesting? So everyone in the world that identifies as a one has the ability to struggle with the same things I do. So it kind of takes that self element out of it. It's like, oh, wow, I'm part of the bigger group of ones. The world needs to know where we are for sure. That's Anyway. I just want to close with just a couple of things. This is, I had a workshop in, I think, 2015, and it was offered by Rabbi Rami Shapiro. And at the end of the workshop, he offered us this, and I'd like to share it with you. Will you engage this moment with kindness or cruelty, with love or with fear, with generosity or scarcity, with a joyous heart or an embittered one? This is your choice, and no one can make it for you. If you choose kindness, love, generosity, and joy, then you will discover in that choice the kingdom of God, heaven, nirvana, this worldly salvation. If you choose cruelty, fear, scarcity, and bitterness, then you will discover in that choice the hellish states of which so many religions speak. These are ontological realities tucked away. These are not ontological realities tucked away somewhere in space. These are existential realities playing out in your own mind. Heaven and hell are both inside of you. It is your choice just where you will reside. And I'm closing with what is known as the autobiography in 5 short chapters. Now, don't worry, friends; they're very, very short. I'd love to share these with you. But I think this kind of speaks to this idea of recognizing that we're mechanical and how we move. We begin to move with bringing consciousness to what's happening inside of us. So I'd like to just share this with you. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am hopeless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit, but my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. And chapter 5, I walk down a different street. Well, friends that are online with us and friends that will watch, thank you so much. Diana, thank you so much for the chance to share some ideas with you.